Hello and very welcome everyone to this session of Ancient History Part 7th. In today's session, we are going to discuss some more topics related to the ancient history that have not been covered so far. And we will see what type of questions would come into exams. So let's start and see what we can learn. So before we start, the images, text and other materials used in our presentations are for educational purpose only. We respect the intellectual property rights of the original creators and owners. If you are the owner and have any concerns or issues, please contact us at sathi@iitk.ac.in and we shall remove the same. So today we are going to start with the early Mauryan Empire, that is from 322 BCE to 185 BCE. If we talk about the Mauryan Empire, so they came after destroying the Nand Empire. So we will have to see that when they have destroyed them and how they protected their empire from Alexander also. So let's see. So vacuum created by Alexander's destruction of the tribal republics in Punjab and neighboring regions gave opportunity to Chandragupta Maurya. So basically Alexander came to India in 326 BC, and first of all he attacked on Porus, and when he particularly destroyed or particularly defeated Porus or Porush, he was marching towards the center region of the Indian subcontinent. But he was not able to come further because of two reasons. One is that he was not able to surpass the river, and the other thing is that the army of Alexander was basically feeling homesick and they were tired, and that is the reason that Alexander has to march back towards the Macedonia. And while marching towards Macedonia, he died in Babylon in basically 323 BC. So this was the time when Chandragupta Maurya, along with his teacher, that was Chanakya, and they particularly also defeated the Nanda Empire. And let's see that how they did that. So the Maurya Empire, 322 to 185 BCE, ruled by the Mauryan dynasty, was a geographically extensive and powerful political and military empire in ancient India. And this was the time when particularly, as I said also, the Mauryan Empire, they have destroyed the Nanda dynasty that was ruling in the Magadha Empire, and after that they started controlling the territories of India. Chandragupta Maurya founded the empire in 322 BCE, that is before Common Era, after overthrowing Dhananand of the Nanda dynasty, which I was talking about. So Dhananand has a rivalry with Chanakya, and Chanakya was the person who had this goal to destroy the Nanda Empire and establish Chandragupta Maurya on the throne. Let's read further on this. So now we have some sources which tells us about the Mauryan Empire and also particularly about the administration and political system of Mauryan Empire. So in that case, Megasthenes was particularly written by Megasthenes was the person who wrote Indica, and apart from that, Kautilya wrote Arthashastra, and Vishakdatta wrote Mudra Rakshasa. Dharam Shastra text Purans, Buddhist text Jatak stories, Dipvamsa, Mahavamsa, Divya Vadan. These are some of the literary texts from which we get to know a lot about the Mauryan Empire. And some of the archaeological findings also, like the punch marked coins, northern black polished ware, wooden palace of Chandragupta Maurya in Patliputra, and Ashokan inscription and edicts. So these are the sources from which we get to know a lot about the Mauryan Empire. Now origin and expansion we need to talk about. So following Alexander the Great death in 323 BCE, which I already told you earlier, Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of the Mauryan dynasty, seized the Punjab area from the southeastern margins of Alexander's old kingdom. And if we talk about Chandragupta Maurya expansion, so after defeating Dhananand or killing Dhananand, they also expanded their empire in the northwestern part and majorly in the central region as well. And apart from that, later they also defeated the Seleucus Nicator, who was a regent that was left behind after the exit of Alexander the Great. So now that the western frontier was at peace, Chandragupta could concentrate his military efforts to the east and south as well. His son Bindusar continued the empire's expansion well into the Deccan, stopping around the region known today as Karnataka. So this was the time when after Chandragupta Maurya, his son came and Bindusar particularly expanded the empire towards more south, and he reached the places like Karnataka in today's region and Deccan as well. And in history, there is a particular thing that has been said that Bindusar was the king who controlled the region between Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal. So that is all about it. Let's move further. Now let's talk about origin and expansion. So Bindusar's son Ashok, he reigned from 273 to 232 BCE, added Kaling to the already vast empire. So if we talk about Bindusar in between that, so Bindusar controlled the region between the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, and also he had done a lot of marriage, and because of which there were a lot of sons he had, and Ashok came out of all of them, and he became the king in 273. I would like to make a point here that it was not 273 but it was 268, because from 273 to 268 BCE there was a civil war going in the Mauryan Empire, and during that civil war Ashok killed almost 99 brothers to gain this empire. So that was a story behind it, and that is why it took him around 5 years to gain the empire, and he became the king basically in 268 BCE. That addition would be the last, however, as the brutal conquest of that region led Ashok to abandon military conquest. Rather, he embraced Buddhism and instituted Dharma as the state ideology. So basically, after getting on the throne, so Ashok used his policy that was basically known as the Bahari Ghosh policy, and in that policy he basically was expanding the empire towards more east and other regions so that he can expand the empire as well as the revenue of the empire also. And that is why after 8 years of his coronation in 261 BC he attacked Kaling. So after Ashok's death the empire shrank because of invasion, defections by southern princes, and quarrels over ascension. So after Ashok's death his grandson became the king, and as soon as he became the king, so these all are weak rulers and they were not able to control this vast empire, and because of the invasion of the southern kingdoms as well, so this particular kingdom was to be destroyed, and finally after the last king, that was Brihadrat, was killed by his own general, that was Pushyamitra Sung. So Sung dynasty came to the power. As I was saying, so Brihadrat, the final emperor, was assassinated in 185 BCE by his Brahman commander-in-chief Pushyamitra Sung, who established the Shung dynasty, which reigned in central India for roughly a century. So after the end of Mauryan Empire, there were a lot of small empires that were created, like Shung dynasty, Kanva dynasty, Satvahan dynasty. Then Indo-Greeks invade into India. Then apart from that, Scythians also invaded in India, and Kushans, basically the Indo-Chinese tribe, they entered into India. And almost after 300 or 400 years, again Gupta Empire ruled over India. Now, first of all, let's talk one by one about these kings, like Chandragupta Maurya, 322 BC to 298 BC. So at the age of 25, Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of the Mauryan Empire, ascended to the Nand throne, and he was the one who killed Dhananand in the battle, and along with Chanakya. There was a story behind that Chanakya was in rivalry with Dhananand, because Chanakya went to Dhananand once when Alexander was about to invade India, and as soon as Chanakya went to his court, Dhananand was basically disrespected Chanakya and throw him out of the court. Chanakya took a oath at that time that he will destroy this empire, this Dhananand empire, and hence is the result. Along with Chandragupta Maurya, he trained Chandragupta Maurya in all the different fields, and with the help of Chandragupta Maurya, he destroyed the Dhananand's empire, that was Nand dynasty. The historical texts have it that the Brahman Kautilya was his mentor and guide. And do remember one more thing, that Kautilya was another name of Chanakya. Chanakya was the name coming from his father. His father name was Chanak, and that is why he was called Chanakya. His mother name was Kautil, and that is why he was known as Kautilya. And if we talk about the real name, so real name was Vishnu Gupta. So these are the reasons because of which um, he was known from different names. One more thing to remember here, that Nanda dynasty was the first of its kind Shudra dynasty at that time. Let's talk about the political achievements now of that time that were happened during the time of Chandragupta Maurya or the Mauryan dynasty. So victory over Nans. With the help of Chanakya, Vishnugupta Kautilya, Chandragupta Maurya defeated Dhananan 322 BCE and founded the Maurya dynasty. Victory over the Greeks. The Seleucids, or also known as the Seleucus Nicator, a contending dynasty for Alexander's legacy, attempted to advance into India in 305 BCE. So Seleucids was the name of the particular empire that was built on the western frontier of India, and it was ruled by Seleucus Nicator. He was a kind of a regent who was remained back after Alexander left the Indian subcontinent, and he particularly also started intervening or invading the Mauryan dynasty, but he was defeated in 305 BCE. However, they were defeated, and after the conclusion of a treaty, the Seleucids and the Mauryans maintained friendly relations, and also Seleucus Nicator married his daughter to Chandragupta Maurya. Now, victory over southern India. Let's talk about this one also. So, Chandragupta Maurya's triumph over southern India is referenced in Ashoka's inscriptions, Jain writings, and Sangam literature. He took charge of the northern Karnataka region. So, if we talk about Chandragupta Maurya, so he started expanding towards south, but later he joined, or he particularly became the member of Jainism, and that is why he left his throne in 298 BC and went to Sarvan Belogala caves along with his mentor, the Jain mentor, and he attained the salvation by remaining hungry. That means death. And when all this happened, Bindusar became the king, and later Ashok became the king. So, according to Jain sources, Chandragupta embraced Jainism towards the end of his life and stepped down from the throne in the favor of his son. Accompanied by Bhadrabahu. Bhadrabahu was the mentor of Chandragupta Maurya. I hope you remember in Jainism we talked about that Jainism was divided into two sects, Shwetambar and Digambar. And Shwetambar was led by Sthul Bhadra, and Digambars were led by Bhadrabahu. And when we talk about Bhadrabahu, so he also became the mentor of Chandragupta Maurya. They together went to Sarvan Belogala caves and they end their life there. So Bhadrabahu, a Jain saint, and several other monks, he is said to have gone to Sarvan Belogala caves in Karnataka, where they ended their life. Then came the Bindusar, 298 BC to 273 BC. Let's talk about him. So Bindusar, known to the Greeks as Amitrochates, and if we talk about in Sanskrit, he was known as Amitrghat, the slayer of opponents. By that point, remember one more point, that Chandragupta Maurya in Greek texts, he was also known as Sandrocotus. Succeeded Chandragupta Maurya. Bindusar is also known as Madrasar and Simhasena. So he was the son of Chandragupta Maurya and his wife Nandini. Bindusar followed the extreme fatalistic order religion Ajivika, founded by Makli Gosal. The full name was Makli Put Gosal. This order had complete disregard for karma. So do remember this point. Ashok became the follower of Buddhism. Chandragupta Maurya became the follower of Jainism, whereas Bindusar became the follower of Ajivika, that was started by Makliput Gosal. And Ajivika is kind of a sect of Jainism. it is related to Jainism because Makliput Gosal was basically earlier the follower of Jainism. Bindusar maintained good diplomatic relations with Antiochus I, the Seleucid king of Syria. Antiochus sent Demachus as ambassador to the Bindusar's court, and Megasthenes was the ambassador sent by Seleucus Nicator into the court of Chandragupta Maurya, who wrote Indica. Bindusar requested Antiochus to send him some sweet wine, dried figs, and a sophist, philosopher. The last, being not meant for export, was not sent. So, apart from the sophist, all the other things were particularly managed and were sent to Bindusar at that time. Tibetan Buddhist monk Taranath describes Bindusar as the conqueror of the land between two seas, peninsular India, which I already told you earlier. The Buddhist biographical history of Mauryan kings, Divya Vadan, recalls an insurrection at Takshila being repressed by Ashok, the son of Bindusar and viceroy of Ujjain at the time. Now, after Bindusar came the Ashok, and if we talk about Ashok, so Ashok was one of the son of Bindusar out of all 101, and Ashok became the king after killing all the other 99 brothers, left only one, and that was Mogliputra Tis, who later became the mentor of Ashok in Buddhism. So his period was from 273 BC to 232 BC, but officially he became the king in 268 BC after killing all his brothers. He was the son of Bindusar, and the mother name was Subhadrangi. Right from his childhood, Ashok showed great promise in the field of administration, and that was also observed by Bindusar. So Bindusar also appointed him the governor of different places where the revolts were happening at that time, like Ujjain and Takshila. So Bindusar appointed him as the governor of Ujjain, that is Avanti, after being pleased by his competence and wisdom, and later he was also given the governorship of Takshila. After becoming a monarch, Ashok fought only one combat, the combat of Kaling. The 13th major rock edict mentioned this war. Now, do remember one more point, that Ashok fought this war in 261 BC. After he became the king in 268 BC officially. So after 8 years of coronation, he fought this war, that was Kaling War. And during this war, particularly, he destroyed the army of the Kaling and gained this particular region. Now, if we talk about the 13th major rock edict, so this is the largest rock edict written of that time, and it clearly mentions about this war that happened at that time and how the policy of Ashok or religious policy of Ashok changed after this war, or how he became sorrowful and how he had his remorse. Ashok fought his battle in the 8th year of his reign in 261 BC. The bloodshed in this war had a deep impact on Ashok, which ultimately changed his personality from a warrior to a saint, as a result of which he gave up the policy of Digvijaya and adopted the policy of Dhamma Vijaya. Digvijaya is also known as Bahari Ghosh policy. Remember that. So question could be asked like who was the king who changed his policy from Bahari Ghosh or Digvijaya to Dhamma Ghosh or Dham Vijaya? So that was Ashok. Now let's talk about the Ashok's Dham. So initially Ashok practiced the Brahmin faith. However, during the Kaling conflict, he turned to Buddhism. And when we talk about Ashok, so Ashok was the one who changed his policy as well, which we already read about. He remained a simple adorer for 2.5 years after converting to Buddhism. Then he joined a Buddhist Sangh and became a Bhikshu Gatik. Those who have lived in Viharas for some time are known as Bhikshu Gatik. So as we know that Ashok was a king as well, so it is not possible for him to remain in the Vihara only, and he had some responsibility towards the state as well. That is why he remained for only 2.5 years, and that is why the name is given, that is Bhikshu Gatik. And who was Bhikshu Gatik? Bhikshu Gatik are those people who lived in Viharas for some time and not their whole life. But he never became a Buddhist monk, rather always remained an adorer. The definition of Dham is produced by Ashok in his second and seventh pillar edict. So this happened during the time of Ashok. That lot of pillars and rock edicts were created. And do remember that all these pillars and rock edicts are majorly found in four languages: Brahmi, Kharosti, Aramic, and Greek. Among them, Brahmi was the prominent one. And later, Brahmi language was later decoded by James Princip during the 19th century. Now let's talk about the rock edicts that were inscripted by Ashok's order. So in the 13th major rock edict, Ashok considers Dham Vijaya to be the greatest victory, and in this is the largest rock edict. Remember that, and it also tells us about the Kaling War. Ashok was the first ruler in the world history carried out this policy of Dham, imperialist victory without violence. For the propagation of Dham, Ashok appointed a new category of ministers named Dhamma Hamatra, and this is the name that is given to the new category of ministers who see that what we need to do to spread Buddhism all over the country and all over the world. In the 13th year of his reign, 256 BC, Ashok addresses the appointment of royal officials in his fifth major rock edict. Aside from Dhamma Mahamatras, additional officials like as Yukta, Rajuka, Pradeshika, and others were tasked with spreading Dhamma ideals. Now let's talk about the administration of Mauryas, that what kind of administration they had at that time. So the core was the king, who was aided by Mantri Parishad, members Yuvraj, Purohita, Senapati, and others. And these are the members of the Mantri Parishad. Yuvraj is simply the prince who is next to become the king. Then Purohita is basically the priest who will tell that what should be done according to dharma. And Senapati is very simple, was the commander-in-chief of the army. Then Tirthas were the highest ranking officers, and Adhyakshas, superintendents, oversaw 26 departments, important officials. So let's read more on this and talk about more important officials. So here is the name and function and post. So first one was Mantri Parishad Adhyaksh, and that was the head of the Council of Minister. Then Purohit was the chief priest. Then Senapati was commander-in-chief, as I was telling you. Yuvraj was the crown prince. Samharta was the revenue collector. Shulak Dhyaksh, that was officer in charge of royal income. Gudha Purushas, spies, and Prati Vedakas, that was informers. So that was all done by the important officials of that time, and these are the functions of them. Now let's talk about the local administration. So Mauryan state also had local and municipal administration. Vish or Ahara districts were the units of a province. So do remember that in case of Mauryan Empire, districts were basically called as Ahara. And if we talk about the Vish, so that is another name for Aharas of the provinces. Provinces, if you want to compare today with today's India, that is the state, like Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and in that state we have districts. So at that time, the districts were called Ahara. Megasthenes mentioned in his account 6 committees of 5 members each for administrating the municipalities. So there were total 6 committees, and they have 5 members in them in every committee, and they are responsible for administrating the municipalities of that time. Now let's talk about some important officers. So first is the Sita Dhyaksha, that was supervised agriculture. Then Panya Dhyaksha, that was superintendent of commerce. Yukta, subordinate revenue officer. Pras Deshika, chief revenue officer. Sthanika, tax collector, worked under Pradeshika. Rajuka, revenue settlement officer, modern day Patwari. Samastha Dhyaksha, superintendent of market, and Pota Vadhyaksha, that was major. Navadhyaksha, that was superintendent of ships. Sulka Dhyaksha, that was collector of tolls. So these are some other subordinate officers at that time who were basically taking care of the municipality things. That means they are taking care of the cities, that how they should be maintained, and some of them are also collecting the revenues that would be helpful in administrating these areas. Now let's talk about the village level officers of that time. So Gramika, the head of the village, it was an elected body, and Gramvrid Das. Panchayat consists of village elders to settle disputes. So these are the people who are made responsible to create this disputes, to settle down the disputes of the villages. Sudarshan Lake was constructed during the reign of Chandragupta Maurya in Ginar Hill in Gujarat, and we get to know about this thing from the Junagadh edict that came during the time of Sak era, when Sak invaded in India and they started their empire. So one of the king was Rudra Daman, and he inscripted this Junagadh script, which tells us about that how Chandragupta Maurya created this Sudarshan Lake, or built this Sudarshan Lake. Now, Tamra Lipti, that is Tamluk in Midnapur, West Bengal, in the east, and Baruch, Broch, or Bari Gaza in the west were two important ports. A large army and navy were maintained, in which all four Varnas were permitted to serve. So we can see that in the army and navy of Mauryan Empire, there was no discrimination on the basis of Varna. Raja, the king, Mitra, the friend, Durg, the fort, Amatya, secretaries, Janpad, territory, Kosh, treasure, Sena, army, were the seven elements of states of Kautilya Saptanga theory. So these are some of the names that are being given, and these are the responsibilities of these people, that what exactly they are doing in the Mauryan administration. Now let's talk about the decline of Mauryan Empire. So the major causes of downfall were over centralization, onerous bureaucracy, excessive taxes on nearly every activity, and foreign invasions. So these are some of the reasons of the decline of the Mauryan Empire. And if we talk about the taxes and other things, they are also enlisted in the book called Arthashastra. Neglect of northwest frontier and construction of Great Wall of China. So one of the reason of the decline of Mauryan Empire is that they were not looking towards the northwestern frontier, and northwestern frontier was the place from where the invaders are coming into the territory of India, and that is how the later invaders came after Shung dynasty, and they destroyed this empire. And even Shung dynasty was not able to compile the whole empire that was left by Mauryan emperors. Financial crisis. Ashok incurred huge expenditure for promotion of his Dhamma mission. That is one of the reason, because he was the king, and now he has turned his policy into a Dham Vijaya, and because of which the expenditure were to be made in the expansion of dharma, that is the Buddhism, and because of which the treasure was about to become empty. Over tolerant, non-violent attitude killed the fighting spirit of the army. So as soon as Ashoka attained this Dhamma Ghosh policy or Dhamma Vijaya policy, so all the soldiers and other peoples are also taking care of these type of things only, and they are not fighting with any particular state in between and nearby, and that is how the army became tolerant more, and they have lost the fighting spirit. Following Ashok's death in 232 BC, Mauryan emperors were inept and tyrannical. That means they were not able to control this vast empire, and lot of neighbors and even some of the people within the Mauryan Empire, they started separating themselves from the Mauryan Empire. Pushyamitra Shung, a Mauryan army commander, killed the last Mauryan emperor Brihadrat and founded Shung dynasty in 185 BC. So this was a kind of a religious dispute also that rose between Brihadrat and Pushyamitra Shung, who was a commander of the army of Mauryas, and that is why he killed. And at that time, Pushyamitra Shung started the Shung dynasty. Brahmins, annoyed by Ashok for banning rituals, supported Pushyamitra Shung, who was a Brahmin. And Pushyamitra Shung overthrew Mauryan king and established the Shunga dynasty. So this was all done, and because of which the decline of the Mauryan Empire was started. And as soon as this all was started, particularly the Shung dynasty remained there, but not for very long time. Now let's talk about the post-Mauryan period, that what happened during this whole time from 200 BC to 300 AD, because we all know that in 319 AD the Gupta era was started. So this was the time in which lot of small dynasties and sometimes large dynasties also ruled the northern part of this country, that is India. So first of them was Shung. Shung conquered the Mauryan Empire, killed Brihadrat, and Pushyamitra Shung established this empire and remained. This dynasty ruled from 185 BC to 73 BC. Capital was in Patliputra, with a secondary capital at Vidisha under the viceroyalty of son Agnimitra. Pushyamitra Shung defended the country, the Gangetic Valley, and its culture against foreign invasion Greeks. Pushyamitra Shung erected Bharut Stupa. So this was all done by Pushyamitra Shung after he killed the Brihadrat. After Pushyamitra, his son Agnimitra ruled the empire of Shung dynasty. Kalidas play Malvika Agnimitra is a love story of King Agnimitra and handmaiden Malvika. So Kalidas was in the court of Chandragupta II, that was Vikramaditya, and he wrote this novel, or you can say a play, that is related to the Agnimitra and Malvika. And do remember that this is related to Shung dynasty. Then Demetrius I of Bactria's substantial attempt to penetrate India was effectively resisted by Vasumitra, son of Agnimitra. And that is why you can see that still during the time of Shung dynasty, the invaders were not able to enter into the Indian subcontinent. Then performed Ashwamedh sacrifice for revival of Brahmanical order and patronized scholars like Patanjali and Manu. And that is why, do remember that Patanjali was the person who created, or the rishi who created yoga during that time, and Manu was the person who created Manusmriti. And Ashwamedh sacrifice was the starting of the Brahmanical rituals back into the Indian subcontinent by Pushyamitra Shung. After Agnimitra, Vasumitra became the king and was succeeded by 7 more kings of the same dynasty. So this was the Shung dynasty. Let's read more on this. Let's read more on post-Mauryan period. So Shung's empire covered regions of Bihar, Bengal and Uttar Pradesh and northern Madhya Pradesh. So if we talk about the Shung empire, so they have covered the regions of majorly like Bihar, Bengal and Uttar Pradesh and some more regions, but they were not able to control the empire for a very long time. Devabhuti was the final emperor of the Shung dynasty. He was assassinated by Vasudev, who founded the Kanva dynasty, which reigned over eastern and central India. So do remember that after Maurya came the Shung dynasty, then came the Kanva. This type of chronological questions can be asked in your exams. Shungs issued gold and silver coins, and they inherited and continued with Mauryan structure of administration. So do remember that Shungs are also using the Mauryan administration at that time. Then came the Kanva dynasty, and Kanva dynasty remained from 73 BC to 28 BC. You can again see that this was a small dynasty once again. So Vasudev Kanva killed his king, Devbhuti of Shung, and founded Kanva rule with Vidisha and Patliputra as their capital. So you can see that the capital is somewhere remaining in between Patliputra, Ujjain. Ujjain will be the capital that was made later by Chandragupta II, and Vidisha. So these are the capitals at that time that were being transferred and being made. Vaishali was also one of them. Bhumi Mitra, Vasudev's son, and Narayan, Bhumi Mitra's son, governed for the next 26 years. Susharman, the last Kanva monarch, was assassinated by the Satvahan, Andhra ruler, and the Kanva dynasty of Brahmins perished with him. So do remember the last Kanva monarch was Susharman. So now try to remember these things. First, the last ruler of Mauryans were Brihadrat. The last ruler of Kanva dynasty was Devbhuti, and the last ruler of Shung dynasty was Devbhuti, and the last ruler of Kanva dynasty was Susharman. Now let's talk about Chedi dynasty. So in the 1st century BC, the kingdoms of Chedis or Chetis were established in Kaling. The politics of this time are remembered for the 3rd Chedi monarch of Kaling, that was Kharvela. Hath Gumpha inscription of Udaigiri hills of Odisha describes him, and as a great conqueror who Magadha, Satvahan and Pandyas of Madurai. So he was the person who controlled the major regions of Magadha and Satvahas and Pandyas of Madurai also, and he was the one who conquered them. Kharvela was a Jain follower who donated caves to Jain monks in Udaigiri hills. Chedi are also referred to as Cheta or Cheta Vamsa and Maha Megha Vahana. So these are some of the particular reference that are given to the Chedis, the kings of Chedis. Now let's talk about Satvahans. So Satvahans ruled from 60 BC to 225 AD. Now let's talk about him also. So Satvahan are known as Andhras in the Purans. So do remember that Satvahan was the one who are referred to as Andhras. Simuk established the Satvahan dynasty. In the 1st century BC, the Satvahans were documented from the northwestern part of Deccan, with their principal capital at Pratisthana, modern Perthan in Maharashtra, on the Godavari river, and their secondary capital at Amravati. So you can understand it like this, that is why they are called Andhras. And if we talk about Satvahan, so they are remembered for 2 more things. One, they started the lead coins, issuance of lead coins, and other than that, they also started the making inscriptions of king face on the coins in India. Let's talk more on this. Information about history of Satvahans are obtained from Aitreya Brahman, Puran epics, Brihat Katha of Gunadya, Kam Sutra of Vatsayan. Do remember that Kam Sutra was written by Vatsayan. Nanaghat inscription, Nasik inscription, Hathi Gumpa inscription of Kharvela, Iragudi inscription of Ashok provides important information about the Shungs. Gujarat and Malwa were conquered as per the Nasik inscription of Nainikat, his wife. Gautamiputra Satkarni was the next major ruler, and his achievements are recounted in the Nasik inscription of his mother, Gautami Balashri. So the next ruler was Gautamiputra Satkarni. Gautamiputra Satkarni, also known as Ika Brahmana, defeated Sakas, Greeks, Parthians, and Nahapana, king of western Satrapa. Around 150 CE, Rudradaman took advantage of the weak successor of Gautamiputra Satkarni and defeated them. Amatyas and Mahamatras were district officers at the incomplete info Satvahan rule, which was called as Ahara. So If we talk about Amatyas and Mahamatras, so they are the names that were used in Mauryans also. So you can clearly see that all the major post-Mauryan dynasties, they were ruling the small region for a small period of time, but most of them are majorly using the only principles that were created by the Mauryas. Let's talk more on this. Satvahan supported architectural growth in the highlands of the Western Ghats, where caves were carved in Ajanta, Nasik, Kole, Bhaja, Kondain, and Kanheri. These caves were cut into make chaityas, Buddhist cave temples, and viharas, Buddhist rest houses. Karle Chaitya is the largest cave temple, and it was built during the time of Chedi dynasty. Then Nagarjun Konda and Amravati were prominent commercial and artistic hubs. Stupas were built here for the first time, and white marble was also used for the first time. Now let's talk about one very important invaders in India, that were Indo-Greeks, and they remained in India from 2nd century BC to 1st century AD. So Indo-Greeks were the Greek people who got settled in India and became localized over a period of time. And do remember that these are the people who introduced the purest form of gold coins in India for the first time. Indo-Greek authority in India had three branches: Bactria, that was North Afghanistan, that was earlier ruled by Seleucus Nicator; Takshila or Takshashila; and Sakal or Sialkot, today in Pakistan. So these are the places in which Indo-Greeks were ruling, and the most famous ruler of Indo-Greek Empire or Indo-Greek dynasty was the person who was also the follower of Buddhism, and he was basically known as Milind, and that is why a book was also written that was known as Milind Pano, or he was also known as Menander. So he was the one who asked a lot of questions to Nagsen, a Buddhist monk, and on the basis of these question and answers, a book was written that was known as Milind Pano. So do remember, Milind Pano was a Buddhist book, and the meaning of Milind Pano is the questions of Milind. Let's talk more on this. An ambassador from the Takshila branch, Heliodorus, was sent to the court of king of Vidisha. So if we talk about the king of Vidisha, so another ambassador from Takshila was sent into his court, and that was Heliodorus. Heliodorus got a stone pillar constructed in Greek style, different from Ashokan style, which was dedicated to Lord Vasudev. Demetrius and Menander or Milind are two significant rulers mentioned from Sakal or Sialkot branch of Indo-Greeks, about whom I was earlier talking about. Menander or Milind, 165 BC to 145 BC, adopted Buddhism under Nagsen, who wrote Milind Panu in Sanskrit. This book is a great source of history of this age, and it also tells us about the question and answer happened between Nagsen and Milind. The development of metallurgy, medicine, astronomy, stone cutting, and perfume making are examples of Indo-Greek technological advances. Patronizing both Buddhism and Hinduism, the greatest contribution of Indo-Greeks is witnessed in the development of the Gandhar school of art. And Gandhar school of art and Mathura school of art were later started by Kanishk of the Kushan Empire. Let's talk about Parthians, the 1st century BC to 1st century AD. So at the end of 100 BC, few kings with Iranian names like Palwas of the Indo-Parthians captured northwestern India. In the reign of Gondopharnes, the most significant of the Indo-Parthians, St. Thomas is said to have come to India for the propagation of Christianity. Sakas were there from 1st century BC to 4th century AD. Sakas, who were also known as Scythians, were from western China. Moz or Moga, about 80 BC, was the first Sak ruler who is shown by inscriptions and a set of coins. Saka monarch ruled from Mathura, Ujjain, and Girnar in North India. They ruled in capacity of satrapas, that is governor, and mahasatrapas. With control over western Ganga Valley, parts of central India and Gujarat, Sakas were almost always at war with Satvahan and put pressure over Deccan region. Do remember that Sakas were defeated by a king called Vikramaditya, and he was not the Vikramaditya who was from the Gupta dynasty. He was the king of the Ujjain region. And when he defeated Sakas in 57 BC, in that particular year, he started the uh, Vikram Samvat, or also known as Vikram era. That is why Vikram era starts from 57 BC. Let's talk more on this. So Rudradaman, 180 CE to 150 CE of Ujjain, center of Saka, is of significance as he finds mention in Junagadh inscription. So Junagadh inscription was basically built or created by Rudradaman, and Rudradaman was the one who was taking care of things related to the inscription, and he said in inscription that Sudarshan Lake was earlier built by Chandragupta Maurya, and he was also the one who reconstructed it. This inscription is in Sanskrit, unlike previous Prakrit inscription. Remember, Prakrit inscription or Prakrit language is related to Jainism. Rudradaman had the lake Sudarshan restored for improved irrigation. It had been built during the reign of Chandragupta Maurya. In 57 BC, the king of Ujjain vanquished Sakas, taking the title Vikramaditya and establishing the Vikram Samvat or period. So do remember, Vikram Samvat or Vikram era starts from 57 BC. Kushans, 1st century AD to 3rd century AD, very important. So Kushans or Yue Chis, two were from China. They ruled in northwest India with Purushpur or Peshawar today as their capital. Do remember that Kushan had two capitals. First was Purushpur, or today it is known as Peshawar. The other one was Mathura. Kanishk, a Mahayan Buddhist, was the most important Kushan ruler. So Kanishk is also the most famous one because of certain things. He started Sak Samvat or Sak era. He was the one who conducted the 4th Buddhist Council. He controlled the Silk Route and also famous for introducing Gandhar School of Art and Mathura School of Art. Let's talk more. Other significant Kushan monarchs in India include Vemkadphises or Vemkadphiz, Huviska, and Vasiska. Do remember, Vemkadphiz is famous for introducing the gold coins in India on large number, because at that time, for doing trade with the Roman Empire, the gold coins were most important, and for that purpose the gold coins were introduced on large number by this Kushan monarch, that was Vemkadphiz. Let's talk more on Kushans, 1st century AD to 3rd century AD. So during Kanishk reign, the 4th Buddhist Council was convened in Kundalwan Vihar, Kashmir, with Vasumitra as the president. Ashwaghosh was the vice president of this Mahayan Buddhist Council. Buddha Charitra or Buddha Charit, that is the biography of Buddha, was composed by Ashwaghosh of Patliputra, and he was the court poet of Kanishk. Nagarjun propounded the Madhyamika philosophy of Mahayan Buddhism. Nagarjun also discussed the idea of relativity and hence is sometimes called as the Einstein of India. So Nagarjun was the scientist and famously known as the Einstein of India. And if we talk about Ashwaghosh, so Ashwaghosh wrote Buddha Charitra, and do remember that in the 4th Buddhist Council, finally the Buddhism was divided into two sectors. One was Mahayan and one was Hinian. Hinian was lesser vehicle or abandoned vehicle, and Mahayan was great vehicle. If we talk about Mahayan, so Mahayan was basically the principle of Mahayan was to worship the idol of Gautam Buddha, while Hinian used to believe in the original teachings of Gautam Buddha. And that's it in this session, guys. I hope you learned a lot of things with me in this session and gained great knowledge. I will meet you in the next session in which we will discuss more on ancient history. And till the time we meet, bye bye. Take care, everyone, and see you soon.